Hello, welcome back. Long time no see. Today in our studio it's JotunSlayer, the Hordes of Hel. So the Jotuns has improved a lot since early access launch, become a strong entry in the genre. Well, as you know, as I mentioned, the genre it's a bullet hell survivors like game that I was talking about the pre-release on the playtest. When I had my criticism, then the game I previewed, that's nothing like this. This is the first release, and we're getting now almost a full year later. So let's talk about this game. The JotunSlayer Hordes of Hel has certainly come a long way, improving on the almost every aspects from before, and while a few minor criticisms still remain, and it's overall become one of my favorite titles in the genre. Like other titles in the survivals like genre, a match of JotunSlayer Hordes of Hel challenges the player to survive even stronger waves of enemies across an open map. Attacks are automated, which the player only really needing to account for movement while their characters fight on their behalf. With each enemy slain, XP orbs are dropped to level you up, and upon a level up, you get to choose from a series of procedurally selected abilities to set up your build, making every run different, as you can never be sure of which options you are going to get. JotunSlayer makes the traditional formula of the game, and an introduction keeps the gameplay fresh by giving the players something new to do in the middle of their run, like little side objectives that can greatly mutate the environment and provide the player with some extra rewards for doing so, including the multipliers that increase the amount of your gold and you live match with. So the match ends if players can survive the down-taking clock, with the enemy waves getting progressively stronger and larger as it goes down, and eventually defeating the map's boss. These bosses are where I feel the game really shines, providing unique encounters with their own dedicated mechanics and feeling like a sufficient challenging gate to pass and unlock new levels. Number of the levels has also been greatly increased since the early access version of the game, and I found that the amount available is more than dangerous. Since early access, the game roster has also explained with the two new heroes. Where I originally throughout the gamecast was a little boring, these two new additions do a lot of things up, and I found myself appreciating the characters available a lot more in my return to the game. My main criticism of the game is in early access where some performances I issued a lack of enemy variety and abilities that didn't get it was useless to use. And when I always expect again performance issues to be addressed before the game's full launch, I was surprised to see the other two issues fixed as well. Where once the game had rather generic looking Viking-themed enemies, JotunSlayer Hordes of Hel now hosts a very diverse cast of incredibly interesting foes. Most intriguing to me is the fact that these foes are different on each map, of which they are a good many to play through, keeping the things feeling fresh from the map to map and to game, making replying experience are more exciting. I strongly criticize the early version of the game for failing for deliver abilities that felt good to use, something that I think you really need to master in the game like this. To be honest, the abilities that really look boring to use cake in the early access version of the game still feels rather lackluster and uninteresting in the 1.0 release. Many of the game abilities feel lackluster, and a great deal of them are invisible, passive buffs rather than something tangible and visual for players to enjoy. That being said, the game has since expanded its roster from available abilities, and the variety helps in some way to make up those problems. Even so, I still feel there's still many choices for the abilities, and the game is still poor and underdeveloped, while it's simply not feeling as good as they could for the players to use. While these abilities often have cool visual effects, and it's a matter of the actual effects and the lack of the roof of the enemies that make them feel weak or dissatisfying to use. Many of the game abilities, even when they're fully maxed out, have a small or long thin impact radius and they give very little feedback when interacting with the enemies. The simple addition of the more visual stimuli when an ability hits an enemy could help the power up the game feel a little bit more impactful. And Enrico is saying that Viking aesthetics feels too much. But the game actually does it incredibly well, adding a sort of grimdark fantasy style that reminds me of Diablo series and paying special attention to the Norse mythology to really bring the whole new things to life. and visually the game is gorgeous, and the developers have only added even more incredible landscapes and visuals since the early access launch, namely the game lighting the textures fully to shine through, creating gorgeous battlefields and effects that are striking without being blinding or obnoxious. Hordes of Hell has come from early access version I played in the start of the year, while still expects of the game more, and I personally would like to have it changed, but the game overall has grown into a solid entry into the genre, one which I feel will have the broad appeal to the fans of the bullet titles and the Norse. While the mechanical satisfaction and the feeling of the power could use some work, JotunSlayer still serves a solid entry into the survivals like genre, especially being visually excellent and showing remarkable growth its early access run. And also, what I would say about the bad things, I didn't like the limited narrative. The gameplay loop can be repetitive and no voice acting, which is not that crucial, but again, would be nice. And Jotun Slayer is fast and mostly good fun, especially for anyone who is looking a new survival action experience that understands the Gen core appeal. The heroes play very differently, and the game features a ton of godly powers to choose from, leading to many builds, some of them impressively overpowered. The Norse team fits mechanics well, as I mentioned before. They did a good job, and if you have any questions, comments, or ideas, hit me down to my email, and we'll be in touch. Bye.